What's up everyone and welcome back. So today's going to be a quick short video, so let's get into it. So the video game industry as a whole seems to be spiraling right now, and it seems like every weekend another studio is having layoffs, and in some cases they're completely closing down. Kotaku put out an article, I think a few days ago, that lists at least 45 studios that have let over 8,000 plus people go this year alone. Now that is pretty crazy. Now, obviously, it's complicated, and there isn't just one thing that is the main cause of it, but many things contributing to it. Now, the obvious reason is they're unable to bring in enough money to keep afloat. So I started to look around, and I found a Forbes article written at the end of 2023 that says, quote, in 2022, the global gaming industry generated an estimated $18.4 billion. The global recorded music industry generated $26.2 billion. And the global movie industry generated $26 billion in box office revenue. Video games are absolutely trouncing every other media out there. How are they not bringing in enough money? I mean, that's just pretty crazy to think about. Now, I think it's safe to assume that most people understand that the majority of money is coming from microtransactions from free-to-play games and what seems like almost every AAA $70 game. And if you happen to be a company with the letters EA in your name, Ultimate Team. Honestly, I knew the microtransactions brought in a lot of money for them, but holy crap. There's an article from CBR that says that 29% of their revenue comes from microtransactions. And the craziest part is that it's increasing every single year, which leads to my next point. The problem with the industry as a whole. The industry has become lazy, in my opinion, and hugely profit-driven. Now, obviously, this doesn't apply to every single publisher, and yes, of course, the goal for a publisher and developer is to make money, but I don't feel like it was the main purpose of creating video games 10 to 15 years ago. Sure, it was something they wanted to do, but it wasn't as profit-driven as it is nowadays. Does that make sense? It felt like the industry actually cared more about what they put out and actually took pride in their work and achievements and had a lot more creative freedom than they do nowadays. Kind of like the movie industry, it feels like they play extremely safe, and that safeness brings almost a repetitiveness to video games. Like, is it safe to say that a lot of shooters more or less feel very similar to each other? Like, there's no creativity to reinvent it anymore. Like, when was the last shooter that reinvented something? Would it have been Titanfall? Maybe? Anyway, looking back, how many games can you think of that were released by large publishers that were as broken as they are now on launch? That require multiple patches to get them up to scuff? And that's not to say that there weren't game-breaking bugs back then, because there were. And maybe it's rose-tinted glasses I'm looking through, but I don't remember games being as broken or as, I don't know. I don't remember games being as broken as they are nowadays. Especially at launch, and sometimes they're never truly fixed. When they started doing day one patches consistently, that seems to be when studios realized they could launch games in poor shape and then patch it on day one. And nowadays, they launch games broken or with horrible performance and rely on day one patches, and even that doesn't always fix the core issues that are there when they launch the game. And this is an issue that's been happening for the last decade now, where games are released, they're not doing well, and they try to patch their way out of the issues. And maybe I'm in a minority and in an echo chamber, but it feels like people are getting tired of being nickel and dime for stuff in games that they're paying full price for, and I'm especially looking at you, Diablo 4 as the most recent example. And before anyone jumps on me, I know it's the extreme, but honestly, how long will it stay the extreme? I remember when Call of Duty 4 came out way back when, with all the DLC and microtransactions, and people thought, no, this isn't so bad, or no, this is okay, or, you know, you had one group saying, nah, this is too far. You had other people going, I don't care. And then you had some people go, it's fine. But that seemed to have really pushed it to every other game. Like, I remember Mass Effect 3. That was a little ridiculous. Or was it 2? It was one of the Mass Effects. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. So to get back on track, a lot of these developers have a ton of people working on games, and clearly it's more than they can sustain. Why can't they sustain it? It could be they just have too many people on staff, so it's like bureaucracy bloat, hiring too many people for a job that they don't need as many people for. That could be part of it. I honestly don't know. But I think the biggest contributor is the lack of effort that seems to be going into making the games great and putting more focus on getting the most money out of people, and in the end, that's hurting the product. Is that a developer decision or a publisher decision? I don't know. But when you focus on money and not the game, then the game will suffer. When you put a $70 price tag on and a lot of games releasing with a lot of issues or what comes off as low effort, especially for the price, people are going to start being more careful with which games they buy. That in turn means less income going to the publishers for said game, and the devs taking the hits with either layoffs or full-on studio closures, and it's not a great system that we have right now. Now, do I put the blame 100% on the devs? No. And now this is just an opinion, but I don't think a lot of devs will want to put in microtransactions and rush the game out, and I think the majority of the blame falls on the publisher. Now, I'm not saying deadlines are not important, because they are, but it seems like a lot of deadlines don't get met, but the games still get pushed before they're ready. Incompetent devs, too much corporate involvement, or both, honestly, I don't know. The one example of this that I can think of is Battlefront 2 by EA, where if I remember correctly, the devs didn't want to do microtransactions, but EA came in and told them to put the system in, which did not go well in the beta, and I believe before launch they took them out, which is good, but why put them in the first place? What I do know is that a lot of the developers are losing their jobs, rightly or wrongly, and I feel it's going to hurt the industry as a whole. There are a lot of talented people in the industry, and this is just my opinion, but I feel like they end up getting excessively limited by publishers like EA, Ubisoft, Activision Blizzard, and they're not able to be as creative as they would like to be, or they get forced to make their game live service, and that hasn't been going well recently for a lot of these games. I don't know, there's a lot to it, Maybe I'm just stubborn and not wanting to think that there's not more creative people in the industry, so they just put out what feels like copy-paste asset flips. Hello, EA Sports. Or maybe I'm just remembering things completely wrong, and games were not as creative as I like to believe they were back then. I honestly don't know. Anyway, I'll finish with this. It's sad to see a lot of these developers getting laid off and studios getting closed down, because a lot of these are really old studios. Like LucasArts, when they went under, that was pretty sad. Then you had the studio for the old Command & Conquer games. I can't think of their name right now, but is it Westwood? I think it's Westwood. That was a sad day, honestly, when they got shut down. Anyway, I don't think a lot of the developers deserve the hate they tend to get. Honestly, that should be directed more towards the publishers who, if I had to guess, micromanage more than they should because they want the profits. And I feel like the one thing I could use to support this whole argument would be smaller indie games. Yes, they take longer. Yes, they don't have as much people working on them, thus they don't need quite as much funding, and maybe they're more passion projects. But indie games, in my opinion, in the current year, are better than AAA games. They have more creative freedom, and they're not afraid to try something new. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, but they're willing to try. And because they're willing to try, I think it's healthier for the industry. Anyway, I apologize if this was a little disorganized, but it is what it is. Alright guys, that's all the thoughts I have for this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Peace.